So before we dive into the course, first of all, I want to mention a few things. I can't make any promises, but I can confidently say that this course will give you a job. And what I can promise is that this course will take you from zero to a React expert, a React monster. That I can definitely give you a promise. Now you might be wondering why I'm so sure about this. And the answer is simple. I began learning React.js in 2018 and started teaching it in 2001. I uploaded my first React.js course on my YouTube channel 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, and since then I gained extensive experience by building numerous projects and working with different companies. Now I'm eager to land you a job. Now I know there's a lot of things that I just said. Now the real question is what you can expect from this course. In this course, you are going to be learning a lot, and I mean a lot of things. So now let me explain all of them one by one in one breath. First of all, we are going to be starting from the React fundamental by building 10 projects and countless exercises. Then we will jump to React with TypeScript by building 5 projects and countless exercises. Then React Hook Form with 1 project, Days UI, Shadescene UI, Redux UI, Tailwind CSS, Simple Hooks, Advanced Hooks. Learn everything about Zoo10 by building 10 projects. Every single thing I know about the Framer motion and also animation in general by building 10 projects, 10 stack query, 10 stack router, and also if you guys don't know, the 10 stack framework which was just launched 3 days ago. And you will learn all of that by building 10 more projects. Then we're going to be jumping into the advanced parts like design patterns in React.js, design system in React.js, React testing, Redux toolkit with 2 full stack projects, Next.js from beginning to advanced level, React Native with projects, and also we are going to be building advanced projects. Okay, that was a lot of things that I just explained. I'm going to break them down one by one in a few seconds. But yeah, this is what you can expect from this course, and this course is still in the construction. You are watching only the first part of this course, and which is about like almost 11 or 12 hours of content. So you are watching the first part of this course, and in the upcoming series we're going to be covering the rest of these topics which I just mentioned. So yeah, I'm super excited and I hope you are too. Now finally, I want to talk about one final thing, and I promise then we will jump to the course. I've mentioned this in my previous courses, in my React Native course and also in my data structure and algorithm course, that if you don't want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, you don't have to. If you don't want to send me a money, you don't have to. If you don't want to follow me on Instagram or in X or Twitter, whatever you want to call that, you don't even have to follow me anywhere. You don't have to do nothing for me. But now if you are taking some advantage from my course, please do not download my courses. If you don't want to follow me here and there, I can totally understand like why. But if you are watching my courses and you are making a career out of that, and still if you are downloading my courses, that's not fair. Like I can't do anything about that because YouTube doesn't have the download feature. But yeah, like if you are watching my content, please do not download that. So yeah, let's get into the course, and I'm gonna make you a React monster. So now let's talk about what are the things that you have to know before jumping into this course. So you only need to know HTML and CSS. That's going to be the main prerequisites for this course. You don't have to know Sass, and this one is optional, but I will highly recommend you to learn Tailwind CSS because in this course we're going to be building a lot of projects, and for the styling we're going to be using Tailwind CSS. So this one is optional, but yeah, once again my recommendation will be to learn that. And also you have to know JavaScript, but in this course you can definitely skip the OOP part. You don't have to know what a OOP is to take this course which you are currently watching right now. And if you guys already saw my old React.js course, where in the world is that? Okay, let me just search for it. There we go. If you guys are wondering like should I have to watch this course before jumping into this React.js course, the video which you are currently watching right now, you don't have to watch this video. And even though I'm gonna private this video, and god damn it, you also have to know TypeScript. I forgot this one. You also have to know this TypeScript. Now let me just say that once again: HTML and CSS, Tailwind CSS, JavaScript, and TypeScript. So that's the only thing that you have to know for watching this course. So now let's get into the coding. So what is React.js? React is a free and open source JavaScript library specially designed for building the user interfaces. Now there are a few buzzwords in this definition. Let me clarify that for you. So the first one we have is a open source. So what is a open source? Open source refers to the type of software or basically anything where the source code is made available to the public. This means that anyone can view, modify, and distribute the code of that specific thing, and in our case, in React.js. Now, what is a library? A library is a collection of pre-written code that developer can use to perform a common task or add a specific functionality to their applications. Now, what is a UI? UI, or the user interface, is the means through which the user interact with our application. React.js was created in 2011. It uses something called the component model, which we will discuss more in detail in this course, but not right now. It allows us to build modular apps, and finally, there is a saying about React.js that learn it once and write it anywhere. So now let me break all of them one by one. React is the most popular, powerful front-end library developed and sponsored by Facebook. A component is just a piece of the UI that has its own logic and appearance. A component can be small as a button or large as an entire application. We will discuss more about components in more great detail later in this course, but not right now. If you learn React.js once, you will not only be able to build only the websites, but you can also build the mobile application, desktop, and also even the virtual reality. And there are a lot more things that you can do with React.js, so you just have to learn it once and write it anywhere. So that was just a quick intro to React.js, and now let me make a setup for our coding journey. In this course, we'll be using a VS Code for writing our code, and you're more than welcome to use any text editor that you prefer. You can use Sublime Text, you can use JetBrains products, you can use anything that you prefer, but in my case, I'm going to be using a VS Code for writing my code. Now, to install React.js, first we will need to open our terminal. After that, we have to type this command: npm create vite at latest. Hit enter. Next, we have to provide some sort of a name for our project. I'll call mine as React Demos. You can call it like anything that you want. Next, we have to select the framework. I'll choose React.js because we are now learning React.js. And yeah, I'm gonna just choose React.js. Next, we have to select the variant. For now, I'll just choose JavaScript because I know there are a lot of people who are watching this course. They don't have the knowledge of TypeScript. So if you are someone who already know what a TypeScript is, you don't have to worry about that. Like, we are going to be still using a TypeScript in this course, but not right now. So yeah, I'm gonna just choose JavaScript for now, but later we are going to be using a TypeScript in this course. Now we have to go inside that folder by using a cd command, or you can say the current directory command. Now I'm going to use the code dot and hit enter, so it's going to open there in my VS Code. Now I want you to open your integrated terminal inside your VS Code and just type this command. So you can either use npm i or you can use npm install if you wanted to. So both of them will work totally fine. So it's going to install all of the packages by which our React.js is depends on. So it's going to take a bit of time. I'm going to fast forward the video right now. Let's discuss these files and folders. So the first folder that we have is a node modules folder, and this folder has all of the module and packages by which our React.js is depends on. And later in this course, if we install any third-party packages, that will be also included in this folder. So the next folder that we have is a public folder, and public is the folder where we put all of our assets file like HTML, etc. Next, we have a src folder, and src or source is the heart of our entire project, and we're going to be spending like almost 90% of our time in this folder. So now inside this src folder, we have a few more files and folder. So the first one we have is the assets folder, and as the name suggests, that in this folder we are going to be putting like all of our assets files and folder like images, svgs, external icons, and so on and so forth. Next, we have two other files like app.css and also index.css. So as the name suggests, that we are going to be writing our style inside these files. So we are going to be providing our style for our UI inside these files. Next, we have two more files like app.jsx and also main.jsx. These are something called the component file, which we are going to be discussing later in this course, but you don't have to worry about that for now. Next, we have a gitignore file, and this is a GitHub related file. When we are pushing our code to GitHub, this file allows us to ignore a certain file or folder. For example, like this node modules folder is a huge folder, and if we don't want to push that to our GitHub repository, so we are going to be just putting the name of our node modules folder inside this .gitignore file, and it's gonna just ignore that whenever we are pushing our code to our GitHub repository. Next, we have our eslint.config.js file, and this is a configuration file for our ESLint. Next, we have our index.html file, and this is the most important file because in this file we have our HTML content, and we also have a div with ID of root. Or React.js will select this element and render all of our content to that specific div. Like, I'm gonna show you from where we are selecting that div with the class of root, like with the ID of root. Next, we have our package.json file, and this file is the heart of our project. It contains metadata about the project such as like project name, version, description, and scripts. And more importantly, it lists the dependencies and their version that our project needs to run. Okay, something which we are going to be discussing later in this course. Next, we have a package log.json file. File is automatically generated and updated when install or modify dependencies. It logs the version of all of the packages and their dependencies to ensure a consistent and reproducible build environment, something which you don't have to worry about. Okay, so next we have a simple readme.md file, and this file provides the summary of what our project is about. It usually includes information like project purpose, feature, and aims to accomplish about this specific project. We can also preview that by clicking on this icon, and here you can see, and this is how our preview will look like once we push our code to our GitHub repository. Next, we have our vite.config.js file, and this file is used to provide configuration for the Vite itself. So yeah, that was a lot about the files and folders, and you don't even have to worry about these files and folder, to be honest. And now I'm going to remove all of the unnecessary stuff from our project. Time for the cleanup. So for now, we don't need this public folder, so I'm going to select that and delete that. Next, we also don't need this SS folder, so I'm going to remove that from here. We also don't need the app.css and also the index.css as well. Next, we have to go inside this main.jsx and just remove this line of code. So I'm going to just remove that semi file. And now finally I'm going to go into my app.jsx file. I'm going to select every single thing from this file, and I'm going to just remove that from here. And next, I'm going to be just creating something called a component, but you don't have to worry about what a component is for now. So I'll just use like const app, and I'll just use my arrow function and return just h1, or you know what, not h1, I'll just return like section, which will say like hello. I'm going to save my file, and now to run this code, I'm going to have to open my integrated terminal, and now I'll just use my npm run dev. So it's going to run my code on this port right here. So I'm going to copy that, or you can just hold command or control and click on that. And we are getting this error right here. That's because we now successfully created this component, but we also have to export this so that we can use it in other files. So I'm going to use like export default and then my app. So if I save that, and now I'm going to have to refresh that. So what are we getting? We are now getting our hello right here, which is amazing. So yeah, this is how we are going to be removing all of that unnecessary stuff from our project. So what is component? Components are independent and reusable bits of code. They serve the same purpose as JavaScript function, but work in isolation and return HTML or JSX to be precise. So something which we are going to be discussing very soon. React.js allows us to make our website modular by using something called the separation of concern. So if I ask you to build this UI, so how can you go about doing that? If you are coming from HTML, CSS and JavaScript background, you will first create index.html file, then CSS file, then JavaScript file, and in the HTML file you will put all of your structure for this project. Then in the CSS file you will put all of the styling, and in the JavaScript file you will provide the functionality to it. This process is still a separation of concern, but in React.js we can do that a bit more better. In React.js, we can split this entire project into multiple components, or you can say the parts. So you can either say like components or parts. So if you want to build this project by using React.js, we will start by creating a component for the navbar, and in that we will put our HTML, CSS and JavaScript inside their specific file. Then we will create another component for a search bar, next for the menu, and also for the article, and also finally we will create a component for the card, and we will reuse that card again and again in our UI. So that was about the theory, but how are we going to make a component? To create a component, you just have to create a JavaScript function. But whenever you are creating a component, you have to keep a few things in mind. The first thing that you have to keep in mind is that the first letter of your component name should be uppercase. You can also create your component by either using the function result keyword, or you can create your component arrow function syntax as well. The final thing that you have to keep in mind is that anytime you are working with a component, you have to return some sort of a HTML from that component. Now to create a component, I'm going to go into my app.jsx file, and I'm going to remove every single thing from there because I want to start from scratch. So as I said, that components are just a JavaScript function. So if I just create a JavaScript function by using either the function result keyword, or I can also create my component by using the arrow function. So for now, I'll just stick with this function result keyword. And by the way, anytime you are creating a component, there are two things that you have to keep in mind. Number one, the first letter of the name should be uppercase and the rest of them will be in lowercase. So if I want to give my component as the name of like app, the first letter should be uppercase and the rest of them can be like anything. You can create that as uppercase or lowercase, that's totally on you, but the first letter should be uppercase. I'm going to just give it the name of like app. And the next thing that you have to keep in mind is that from the component, you always have to return some sort of a JSX. We did not discuss about JSX, not right now, but we will very soon. So I'm going to just write my h1 right here, and I'll just write like hello world. So now if I save my file, this is how we are going to be creating our component. But now we have to tell our React.js that now we successfully created this component. We want to render that to our UI. So to render that to our UI, first of all, we have to export that so that we can use that in other places of our project. So I'm going to just use like export default and then app. So as soon as I do that and save my file, now I'm going to open my terminal right here. I'm going to just use my npm run dev, and here you can see we are now getting our hello world right here from our component. So what's going on? So now we are successfully creating our component, and now we are exporting there so that we can use this component in other part of our project. So where we are using that component. So if I go into my main.jsx file right here, so here you can see we are now rendering this component right here. So first of all, we are now importing this component which we just created right here inside this app.jsx file, and now we are exporting there, and here inside this main.jsx file we are now importing this component and we are now rendering there to our UI. And as I said previously, that I want you to keep in mind this root. Now we are selecting that root right here by using document.getElementById, and we are now selecting that root which is inside this index.html file. As you can see right here, now we are selecting that root. So here you can see we have a root ID, and we are now selecting there by using document.getElementById right here. And now inside that root, like this root, we are now rendering our app component right here. So that's the only reason we're now getting this hello world right here. So if I change something inside that component, like if I go into there, and now I'm gonna just change that to like my own name maybe. Now if I save that, and here you can see I'm now getting my own name. So yeah, this is how we are going to be creating a component. And let me just say that once again, anytime you want to create your component, the first letter will be uppercase and the rest of them can be either uppercase or lowercase, or that's totally on you. And also we have to return some HTML from this function. Okay, so we can also refactor this code to use the arrow function. So I'll just use like const, and I'm going to just convert this function to use the arrow function. If you prefer this way, you can also create your component by using this arrow syntax, or you are more than welcome to use this function result keyword right here. So yeah, this is how we are going to be working with components. Welcome to the first challenge of this course. So here is the UI, and I want you to split this UI into multiple components. You don't have to write any code for that. Just get a pen and paper if you have that, but if you don't have a pen and paper, you can also use some sort of a photo editing software which would allow you to just mark a few things inside this UI and make them as a separate component. And yeah, we also have another part of this challenge which we are going to be seeing in a few seconds, but I want you to go ahead and pause the video and do this challenge by yourself. So if you can do it, then come back and watch the solution. And now I'm going to give you my solution. So I'm going to use a Figma for that, and if you want to use some sort of other photo editing software, you are more than welcome to do that. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a component for this burger menu. So I'm going to just create a separate component, and I'm going to put like all of the structure, the styling, and also the functionality inside that component. And then I will also create a component for the navigation. So I'll just create a navigation right here. And excuse my drawing, and also my bad, yeah, you get the idea. So this is how we are going to be creating a component for the navigation. We can also split this entire navigation into multiple components, but we don't have to. Like, this is going to be enough for this navigation component. We will put our logo inside there. We will also put our search field, which will allow us to search our stuff inside this Wikipedia. And finally, we are going to be also providing our create account and also the login. And we also have these three dots, and I don't have any idea what the hell these three dots do. Okay, so that's going to be my second component. Next, we are going to be also creating a component for the banner. In some situation, we would want to show this banner, and in a lot of times we are not going to be showing this banner. So yeah, this is going to be basically my primary component, and there is a big difference between like a huge component and a small component, which we are going to be seeing inside this course, but not right now. So this is going to be my third component for the banner. Okay, and also we are going to be creating a component for the sidebar or you can just give it the name of like aside if you wanted to, but I'm gonna give it the name of like sidebar, and I guess that's gonna be fine. Okay, and also we are going to be creating a component for the appearance, so I'm gonna also mark that as a separate component. Okay, so we can also split this entire UI into like nested component as well. We can also create a separate component for these radio button if you wanted to, but we don't have to do that. Okay, and also we are going to be creating a component for the header. So now let me just highlight that right here, just like that. So this is going to be basically our header, and finally we are going to be creating a component for our main content. So this is going to be basically our huge component which will allow us to render all of that content right here inside this Wikipedia. Okay, like once again, we don't have to create a component for all of that. We can put all of that entire logic into one component if you wanted to, but that's not going to be the ideal way to create our website or our apps. So that's why we are going to be splitting this entire UI into multiple components. So yeah, that was the part 1 of our challenge 1. Next we have to create a new file called grid.jsx, and inside that file we are going to be creating our grid component by using the function declaration syntax. After that we are going to be refactoring that code to use the arrow function instead, and finally we just have to render that into our app component. So once again, give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a components folder, and I'm going to give it the name of like not tsx but jsx, and I'm going to use my RAFC, so it's going to give us all of that code, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just create a function, and now I'm going to give it the name of like grid. It's not going to take any perimeter, so I'm going to remove that, and finally we only have to return our h1, and which will just say like grid or hello word would be fine. So I'm going to save my file. Now we have to export this component so that we can use that in other files. So I'm going to be using like export default of grid. So now I'm going to save my file. Let me go into my app.jsx component, and let's just register that component right here. Okay, so if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our hello world right here, which is looking amazing. But I'm going to go in there and refactor this code to use the arrow function. So I'm going to remove that and change that to const, and also make that as an arrow function. So now if I save my file, and still we are getting that same result, which is saying hello world. Okay, so yeah, that was our first challenge in this course. We usually create a separate components folder, and we put our components inside there. So I'm gonna just create two components with the name of like greet or greeting.jsx, and also add.jsx. And by the way, you can give it any name that you prefer. And now I'm gonna just create my greet component right here, and I'll just return my h1, which will say hello, or yeah, hello would be fine. I'm going to save my file, and now I'm going to show you extension which will help you a lot. So I want you to go into your extension area and just search for React.js, and once you do, here you can see I want you to install this extension in your VS Code. Just install this extension, and it's going to give you a lot of snippets. Okay, so throughout the course I'm going to show you a lot of snippets which you can use, but by the way, if you want to use that, so you have to install that in your VS Code. So this component took a lot of time to write. Now in this component, I'm going to just use RAFCE. Okay, so you just have to write there, and once you hit enter, so here you can see it's going to give us the entire boilerplate of our component. Let me just show you there once again. You just have to write RAFCE and hit either tab or hit enter. It's going to give us that entire component right here. So if I save my file, now that we successfully created our add component and also our greet component, and by the way, we also have to export that so that we can use it in other files. So we have to just use export default and then greet. Okay, so if I save my file, now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to register them inside our app components so that we can see them on the screen. So I'll just remove this h1 from here, and I'll just use my greet first of all. And as soon as I hit enter, here you can see it will automatically import this. So if it didn't, you have to import them manually. So now I'll just close that like this. And by the way, this is how we call our component. This is how we register our component. This is how we export them. And this is how we call them. Okay, so if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our hello right here, which is coming from this greet component. I'll remove that from here, and I'll also render my add component, and if I hit enter, so it's going to automatically import that. Now I'm gonna save my file, and what are we getting? We are now getting our ad right here. So we can write like anything that we want. So I'll just write like something cool. And now if I save my file, and we're now getting what something cool right here. So yeah, this is how we can create a separate component folder, and we can put our entire components inside there. Welcome to another challenge. So in this challenge, you're going to be creating 3 components and a lot of JSX inside there. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a header.jsx file, and inside that file you're going to have to create your functional component with the name of header, and inside that header you're going to be returning the header element, and inside that header element you're going to be creating h1 which will say like welcome to my website, and also you're going to be creating underneath this h1 you're going to be creating your navigation, and that navigation will have 3 anchor tags. The first one will say home, the second one will say about, and the third one will say contact. So that's going to be the first part of this challenge. Okay, so if you want to give it a shot right now, so you can totally go ahead and give it a shot, but now I'm going to explain these two and then I'm going to give you my solution. The next thing that you have to do is that create a footer.jsx file and create your functional component inside there, and it will only return the footer element, and inside that footer element you're going to be providing a paragraph which will say like copyright 2024, or it should be 2025, my bad. But yeah, you can provide like basically anything that you like, but in my case I'm going to specify like copyright 2024 or 25 and my website. And that's the second part. And now for the third part, you're going to be creating your main component, and that main component will just return your main element, and also inside that main element you're going to be creating your h2 which will say like main content. And now underneath that h2 you're going to be creating a paragraph, and you can like basically put anything that you prefer. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and then I'm going to give you my solution. And basically you're going to be just importing there and putting there right here inside the app component. So now let me just show you all of that. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my header.jsx, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE for that. Save my file. I'm going to remove this header from there and provide my h1 which will say like welcome to my website. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing. Next, we also have to create our navigation, and inside this navigation we're going to be creating a 3 anchor tag. So if I just use like this a and times 3, so it's going to give us this anchor tag like 3 times. So for the first one we're going to be providing a home, and for the second one we're going to be providing a about, and also for the third one we're going to be providing a contact. Okay, so if I just write like contact and save my file, so it's going to format there for me. I'm going to go ahead and go to my app and register my header component right here. Okay, let's just import that and register that here. So now if I save my file, and here you can see we're now getting what welcome to my website, home, about, and contact. So that was the first part. Now in the second part we're going to be creating a main component. Okay, so I'll just say like main.jsx, and inside there we're going to be creating our RAFCE, or you know what, it should be a main, you know what, you can like basically give it any name that you prefer, but in my case I'm going to give it the name of like main content and change that to main. So I'm going to copy that and let me just place that right here. Okay, and I'm going to also use the h2 which will say like main content, and now underneath there we're going to be creating our paragraph which will say like this is the main content, and now I'm going to save that. Now let me just go ahead and go to my app and register my main component right in here. And now here you can see we're now getting like main context content. There we go. So now if I save my file, and now we are getting like main content, and this is the main content which is looking amazing. Now for the final component we're going to be creating our footer.jsx, and now inside there we're going to be using our RAFCE and remove this div and change that to footer. Okay, let's just provide our paragraph which will say copyright 2025 my website. So now if I save my file, we also have to register that inside our app component like so. Okay, and I'm going to register that, save my file, and now we are getting our copyright 2025 my website. So that was another challenge about the basic component. What is JSX? JSX allows us to write HTML in React.js. JSX makes it easier to write and add HTML in React.js. So this is how our JSX looks like. So first of all, we have our component, and inside this component we are now returning some HTML. Now I know a lot of you will ask me, Hussein, like why can't we just call it HTML? Why are we calling it JSX? JSX simply means JavaScript XML. Behind the scene, we are working with JavaScript. This is just the illusion of HTML. This is not HTML code. Behind the scene, our React.js compiler will compile our code into pure JavaScript. So don't believe me? Now let me show you. Now let me write a bit of JSX so that you guys can see how we can work with JSX. So I'll just create a section, and inside this section I'll also provide a bit of ID to it. So I'll just give the name of like section, and inside this section I'll create my h1, which will say my website. Underneath this h1 I'll create my article, and inside this article I'll create h2, which will say like welcome to React.js. Now underneath this h2 I'll create a paragraph, and which will say like paragraph content or text. I'm going to also provide a class name to it, and by the way, instead of writing a class, you have to write a class name, and I'm going to tell you why, but you have to write a class name for now. And I'll just give the class name of text right here. So if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our result right here. So if I right click on there and go to my inspect element, we are first of all getting our root, and now inside this root we have our section with the ID of section, we have our h1, we also have our article, and inside this article we have this h2, and we also have this class. We are now providing a class name, and here you can see we are now getting a class. This is a JSX rule which I'm going to explain in a few seconds, but yeah, here you can see this is how we can write HTML inside our JavaScript functions. So to combine all of that, this is how we can create our component. Now let me show you how our React.js convert all of this HTML to JavaScript. And to show you that, first of all, you have to go into this babel.js.io, and inside there you have to place your HTML content. So I'll just copy my HTML content from here, and now I'm gonna just place it right here. And what are we getting? We are now getting JavaScript. So if I copy there, and instead of providing this section and article and stuff like that, I'm going to just remove there from here. I'll just provide my return statement, and now I'm going to place this content right here. I'm going to also remove this stuff. Let's just remove them. I'm going to also select this comment and hit Control D or Command D and Command D, and I'm going to just remove that from here. So if I save my file, now I'm going to zoom out a bit, and first of all I'm going to also copy this line of code, and I'm going to have to put that at the top. And you don't have to worry about this code. We are not going to be writing our code like this. You don't have to worry about this coding. So I'm going to save my file, and now if I go into my website and refresh there, once again we are getting this same result like my website, welcome to React, and paragraph content. So if I go into the section, we have our ID, we have our h1 article or h2, and also our paragraph with a class of text right here. So if you weren't using JSX, so we are going to have to create our component this way. Like, come on, look at this redundancy. We are now using some dash JSX and providing a section to it, then we are providing ID and children, and there are a lot of things going on. So instead of writing all of them, I'm going to totally remove them from here, and I'll just replace them with this return statement, and I'm going to also remove this first line. So this is what a JSX is, and this is the power of React.js and also JSX in React.js. Welcome to another challenge. So in this challenge, you're going to be practicing JSX. So first of all, I want you to create a file with the name of welcome message.jsx, and inside that file, then you have to create a component with the name of welcome message. Inside that component, you will have a div, and inside that div, you will have your h1 first of all, and inside that h1, you're going to be providing like hello world. Underneath this h1, you're going to be also creating a paragraph which will say like welcome to learning JSX, and finally you have to import in the app.jsx and render that to the DOM. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now I'm going to give you my solution. I'm going to create a file with the name of welcome message.jsx, and inside there we are going to be using our RAFCE to create this component right here. And first of all, we have our div, and now inside this div we are going to be defining our h1, which will just say like hello world. And now underneath this h1, we're going to be creating our paragraph which will say like welcome to learning JSX. I'm going to save this file. Now let me go ahead and go to my app.jsx file and register my welcome component right in here. Okay, so I'll just close there like so, save my file, and here you can see we are now getting hello world and also welcome to learning JSX. So yeah, that was our second challenge. Whenever you're working with JSX, there are a few rules that you have to keep in mind. I'm going to show you their rules, but first of all, I'm going to remove this article from here. I'm going to save my file, and here you can see we are now getting my website, which is looking amazing. So the first rule that you have to keep in mind is that from one component you are allowed to return only one parent. Like there can't be multiple parents. So what am I talking about? Let's suppose if I just move this line of code into new line, so what are we getting? We are now getting an error. It is saying that you are not allowed to create multiple parents. Like this is a parent and this is also a parent, or I can just write a div, and here you can see still it's going to give us that error right here. And why is that? Because as I said that our React.js compiler will compile our code to JavaScript, and that's not allowed in JavaScript. Anytime you are working with JSX, this is the first rule that you have to keep in mind, that from one component you are only allowed to return one div. And now inside this div you can do anything, like you can create any amount of nested stuff. So you can create your h1, you can write anything inside there. Even inside this h1 you can write a div and you can write anything inside there underneath there. But you have to keep in mind that from one component you have to return only one parent, and anything you write inside that parent will totally work. Okay, so that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind. The next thing that you have to keep in mind is that in JSX you have to close all of your tags. In HTML, like that wasn't necessary if you want to work with like images, so you would just create your image and you don't even have to close that if you don't want it to. But in JSX you have to close there, as you can see right here. So if I just remove there, it will give us that error right here, like JSX element image has no corresponding closing tag. Like you have to close there, and that doesn't matter if you're working with the image or if you're working with the divs. So I'm gonna just remove that from here, and here you can see it's gonna also give us that error right here. And we can also make it as a self-closing tag if you wanted to, but you have to keep in mind that anytime you're working with JSX you have to close all of your HTML tags. Okay, so that's the second thing that you have to keep in mind. The third thing that you have to keep in mind is that anytime you are working with the classes, you are not allowed to provide a class by using the class keyword. Instead of a class, you have to provide a class name. So what am I talking about? I'm going to just write h1 and I'll just say like hello. And now if I just provide a class right here, I'll just write a class. And now here I'm going to just say like my class, and here you can see it's not going to give me any error. Now if I save my file, and now if I refresh there and go into my console, now it's going to give us this error like invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? Because our JavaScript compiler will now think that you're defining some sort of a class. As we learned in the OOP section, like object-oriented programming section in our JavaScript course, JavaScript will think like you are defining some kind of a class, and like the polymorphism, inheritance, and all of that concept that we learned. Okay, so JavaScript will think that you're defining that class, but we are not defining that class. We are just providing a class to our element. Okay, so to provide a class, we have to use our class name instead. So if I just remove that, and if I change there to the class name, and now if I save my file, and now if I refresh there, and here you can see that error is now gone. So yeah, that was the third thing that you have to keep in mind. And now the fourth thing that you have to keep in mind, anytime you are working with the forms, in some situation we also want to provide a label for our input field. Okay, so I'll just use like form, and I'm going to just remove this action because we don't need that. And now inside this form we will just create our label. So if I just create my label, in some situation we would want to provide our for attribute to it. So if I just write like name, and I'll just use my name inside there, I'm going to create my input field which will say like text would be fine. I'll also provide a bit of placeholder to it, so enter your name. I'm going to save my file, and now if I just refresh there, and what are we getting? We are now getting like invalid DOM property 4. Did you mean the HTML4? Because now once again our JavaScript compiler will think that you're creating some sort of a for loop. Okay, so we are not creating a for loop. We are now providing just a for property or the for attribute to our label. So instead of providing a for, we have to write our HTML4. Okay, so I'm going to save my file, and now if I refresh there, and here you can see that error is now gone. I can write anything I want. So yeah, that was a few rules about JSX that you have to keep in mind whenever you're working with the JSX. In this series, we learned a few rules about JSX, and we're going to be exploring more throughout this course, but now I'm going to just make you recall those rules. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a file with the name of jsxrules.jsx. Inside that file, create a component or a functional component with the name of JSX rules, and then inside that JSX rules component, you're going to be creating a div, and inside their div, first of all, you have to write h1 with the title of JSX rules, and now underneath there, you're going to be creating a three paragraph, and one paragraph will say like JSX must return a single parent element, another paragraph will say like JSX element must be properly closed, and the third one will say like JSX attribute are written using a camel case. Like instead of using a class, we're going to be using a class name. This is the most simplest challenge. Okay, so give it your best shot. If you can do it, then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. Now let me create my component with the name of jsxrules.jsx. I'll just create my functional component right here, and now inside this functional component, the first thing that we have is our div, and now inside this div we have our h1, and I'll write like JSX rules, and now underneath this h1 we are going to be creating a paragraph which will say like JSX must return a single parent element. Okay, that's going to be the first one. We're going to be also creating another paragraph which will say like JSX element must be properly closed, and come on, this should be a clause, and also we have a JSX attribute are written using a camel case like so. So I'm going to save my file. We have to remove them, and yeah, that's our simple exercise. Now we have to register this component inside our app, so I'll just register there right here. Okay, so we have our JSX rules, so I'm going to save my file, and here you can see we are now getting those rules right here. So we have our JSX rules. So yeah, that was another challenge in this course. Now let's talk about expression in JSX. So with JSX, you can write your expression inside the curly braces, and the expression can be a React variable or property or any other valid JavaScript expression. JSX will execute that expression and give you the result. Okay, so here you can see I have my app component, and now inside this app component I have a paragraph, and now inside this paragraph I'm now writing 2 plus 2 as it is without providing any curly braces, nothing to it. So it's going to give us the result of 2 plus 2 as it is. Why is that? Because our React.js will treat it as a text, but now if you wrap that inside the curly braces, it's going to give us the result of 4. And why is that? Now React.js will treat it as a valid JavaScript expression, so it will execute that expression and it's going to give us the result of that. And we are not just limited to write 2 plus 2. We can also create some sort of a variable, and we can put our values inside there. Then we can use that inside our UI. We can even also create a function. We can also embed that function inside our UI and also the classes as well. So now let me just show you all of that in action. Now let's discuss how we are going to be embedding dynamic content in our JSX. So first of all, I'm going to just create my paragraph. Inside this paragraph, I'll just say like 2 plus 2. And now here is a question for you. What do you think will be the result of this code? So if I save my file, I want you to give me the answer. And the result will be 2 plus 2. Why is that? Because we are not wrapping this code inside the curly brace. But now if I wrap that inside the curly brace, we now entered our JavaScript word. So if I save my file now, and here you can see now it's going to give us 4 right here. Why is that? Because now we are running this expression inside the JavaScript. So our React.js compiler will compile this code, and it will think like this is a JavaScript code, so it will execute this code. So if I just write like 2 plus 2 is equal to, outside from this curly braces, now it's going to give us like 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Okay, which is amazing. So that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind. Next, I'll just create a variable with the name of like my name, and I'm going to store my name inside there like Hussein Web Dev. And now underneath this paragraph, I'm going to create my h1 right here. And now let's suppose if I want to dynamically render my variable name inside this h1, how can I go about doing that? Well, so if I just write like my name, if I save my file, I'm now getting my name right here, but I want to get this value like Hussein Web Dev. So how can I go about doing that? To do that, we have to wrap this variable name inside these curly braces, like the curly opening brace and the curly closing brace. So if I save my file, and now it's going to give us Hussein Web Dev right here. Okay, so this is how we are going to be rendering our variables dynamically inside our JSX. We are not limited to just render our expression and also our variable name. We can also provide arrays if you wanted to. So I'll just create like paragraph. I'll just say like my friends list, and now inside this list, I'm going to first of all open and close my JavaScript world, and now inside there we are going to be creating our array which will say like Alex. We also have John and also Wahid and something like that, and Jordan. So if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting like my friend list. We have Alex, John, Wahid, and also Jordan right here, which is amazing. Now I'm going to create a function, and I'm going to execute or embed this function dynamically inside my JSX. So I'll just use like multiply. It's going to take the parameter of a and also b, and it's going to return like a times b. Okay, And now underneath this paragraph, I'm going to create yet another paragraph which will say like 2 times 2 is equals to, and now we are going to be entering our JavaScript word. And now inside this JavaScript word, we are going to be executing our function, which is a multiply. And for the perimeter, I'm going to pass 2 comma 2. So if I save my file, and what are we getting? We are now getting like 2 times 2 will gives us 4. So if I change that to like 2 times 10, save my file, it's going to give us like 2 times 10 will gives us 20, but here I'm writing like 2 times 2, and now it's going to give us 20. So if I just change that to like 2 times 10, and now the label is totally correct. Like this is going to be the label, and this is going to be the actual value which we are now getting from the JavaScript. I'm gonna undo that. And the final thing that I want to show you about the embedding is that we can also embed a special class into our JSX. So I'll just create a special, and I'll just write like simple class or something like that. Now I'm going to create a paragraph. I'm going to provide like this is special class or something like that. And inside this paragraph, what I want to do is that I want to create my class name, and I'm going to just remove these quotes from here, and I'm going to provide my curly brace. And now inside these curly braces, I'm going to copy this simple class name, and I'm going to just place it right here. So if I save my file, and now watch what happens. So if I select this class right here, so what are we getting? We are now getting our simple class, and now this simple class is coming dynamically from our JavaScript word right here. So I can totally change that to like anything I want. So if I save there, and here you can see it's going to give us like anything I want. So yeah, this is how we are going to be creating our stuff by using a JavaScript, and this is how we are going to be embedding there to our JSX by using these curly braces. In this challenge, you are going to be practicing the dynamic content in React.js. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a file with the name of greetings.jsx, and inside there you have to create your functional component with the name of greetings. So inside that component, you are going to be returning a div that is containing the h1, and that h1 element will dynamically display the greeting message. Like basically you have to create a variable with the name of like hello world or hello or gracias or something like that, and you have to render that greetings dynamically inside this h1. Next, create a paragraph element that dynamically display the current date. So if you can do this one okay, I'm gonna show you the solution, but yeah, at least give it a shot. If you can do it, like doesn't really matter. Okay, and yeah, here are more instruction if you care about them. And next you have to create a component with the name of product info, and inside that product info component you're going to be returning a div, and inside their div use the product object, in this case not just a product but the product object that contains the following properties, like name will be set to laptop, price will be set to like 1200, availability will be set to in stock. So once you do that, then render your component to the app.jsx, and that's going to be it. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, then come back and watch the solution, and I'm going to give you my solution. So I'll just create my greet.jsx component. I'm going to be using my RAFCE, and the first thing that I want to do is that I want to greet. So I'll use like greet, which will say hello, and underneath there, or you know what, let me just show that right here. I'm going to be using h1, and I will just render my greet right here. So I'm going to save my file. Let me go ahead and go to my app and register my greet right here, and now I'm going to save my file. And here you can see we're now getting our hello right here, which is looking amazing. We also have to render the date, so I'll just use like date, and now let's just use our new date, and now I'll render there right here. So I'm going to just provide like date as a label, and here we are going to be rendering our date, and now we have to access the get date method on there. So now if I save my file, now it's going to give us like the date is 19. So that was the first portion of this exercise. Now let's just create another component with the name of product info.jsx. JSX, there we go. We're going to be also creating our functional component, and this functional component will have our product. So I'll just write like product, and that's going to be an object. So we're going to be providing the name as a property, and that's going to be set to a laptop. We're going to be also providing the price, and price will be set to like 1200, and also the availability will be set to in stock. Availability in stock. Okay, so now we have to save our file. Now that we have to render the name, price, and availability totally dynamically. So how can we go about doing that? I'm going to remove this name, and now here inside there we're going to be using our h1. Let me just provide a label of name, and now we are going to be using a product.name right here. Now if I save my file, first of all we have to register this component. So I'm going to be using like product info, and hit enter, save my file. It's going to give us a laptop. Now I'm going to go in there, And the next thing that we have to do is that we also have to render the price and also the availability. So I'm going to basically duplicate that 2 times and change the label. So I'll just change that to price and also put a dollar symbol there. And we also have to change the name to the price. Okay, and also we have to remove this name and change that to availability. So I'll just place this availability right here because I can't spell that. Okay, so I'll just write like availability here, save my file. And now we are getting the name of the laptop, also the price, and also the availability, which is now set to in stock. So now if I change like any of these values, so instead of 1200, I'm going to change that to like 1500. Now it's going to totally render there dynamically. And we can also change that to like computer instead. And now it's going to give us a computer. Okay, so yeah, that was our challenge about the dynamic content. Now let's talk about list in React.js. So in React.js, you will render your list with some type of loop. The JavaScript map array method is generally the preferred method to use for the list. So here you can see we have our component right here, and now inside this component we have our numbers array. And now if you want to iterate over through each number inside this array and render there to the DOM, so we are going to be using first of all the curly braces, and now inside these curly braces we're going to be getting our numbers list, and then we can use our map method on there. And now inside this map method is going to take a callback function, and we're going to be passing a number and also the index. And now inside there we're going to be using the UL and LI to render our numbers to the DOM. So this is how we are going to be doing all of this. Now let me show you that in action. Now let's talk about how we can work with list. So first of all, we have to create a list. Then we are going to be working with that. I'll create a numbers list, and inside this numbers I'll put like 1 2 3 4 5. And now we have to iterate over through each item inside that list and do something with that. So in my case, I'm gonna just iterate over through each item inside this list, and I'm gonna render that to the DOM. So to do that, first of all, we are going to be using like some sort of a main or section or anything like that so that we can work with that. So then we are going to be entering into our JavaScript world so that we can use our JavaScript array method like push, pop, reduce, filter, map, and all of that methods. In this case, I'm going to copy the name of this numbers array. And now if I just use dot, so here you can see we have all of our JavaScript array method, like we have add, concat, copy within, entries, every field, filter, find index, flat map, and we have a lot of them. But in this case, I'm only interested in the map method, and now here we are going to be passing our callback function to it. So I'll just use like number would be fine. And now for this callback function, here you can see, I want you to notice that now in this case we are providing a parenthesis, we are not providing a curly braces. So I want you to keep that in mind. So now we are providing these parentheses, and now if I hit enter right here, I'm gonna just write my UL. And now inside this UL, I'm going to write my LI right here. So now inside this LI, a lot of people will think that we are going to be just copying this number, and we have to just place it right here and save our file, and that's going to be it. Let me just say that once again. We are now iterating over through each element inside this array. We are now rendering that to our browser. But now watch what happens. Here you can see we are now getting a number and we are not getting our numbers right here. So to get these numbers, we have to once again enter our JavaScript world. So I'm gonna have to remove that, or you know what, we have to just wrap that with these curly braces right here. So if I just wrap that with these curly braces, save my file, and now we are getting 1 2 3 4 and 5. But there is still a problem. Now you might be asking like, what's the problem? If I go into the console, what are we getting? We are now getting an error. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. And why are we getting this error? We are now getting this error because later in this course we are going to be learning about something called the stat, and stat will allows us to mutate or change these values. Like let's suppose if I want to remove something from this array, or if I want to add a new element to this array, so how can I go about doing that? So to do that, for that we are going to be using a stat. We are not there yet, so we are not going to be discussing a stat right now, but you have to keep in mind that anytime you want to change something inside this array, we have to first of all provide a label for that place. Okay, so like let's suppose if I want to either remove or update or something inside this array, I'm gonna have to first of all provide some sort of a unique label to it. I'll just write like 10 for this first one, and then 20 for the second one, and 30 for the next one, and so on and so forth. So this is how we are going to be providing a unique label. So anytime we remove something from this list, our React.js will know from where we remove that specific thing. So to do that, we are not going to be providing our unique things right here for each element inside our array, but instead we are going to be providing that for the parent. So we are going to be using a key right here, and that key will always be unique. Like you have to provide a unique thing for each element inside this array. Okay, so if you provide like one for this one and also one for this one, it's going to give you an error. Like it's going to still say each child should be unique. Okay, so now I'm going to copy that and now I'm going to place it right here. And now if I save my file, now if I just refresh there, and here you can see we are now getting 1 2 3 4 5, and we are not getting that error. So this is how we are going to be iterating over through each element inside our list, and this is how we are going to be providing a unique key or a unique identifier for each element inside this list, and this is how we are going to be rendering there to the DOM. Now I'm going to just remove all of that stuff from here, and I'm going to also remove this number from here, and I'm going to replace that with this huge array. And here you can see we have our users info array, and now inside this array we have a few objects. So we have an object 1 2 and a lot of them, and inside this object we have a username, we have the email, and also the location. So we have username of Hossein, then we have some sort of a test email, and we also have a location, and then we have the same thing for each object inside this array. So now I want to iterate over through each element inside this array, and I want to render the username, email, and location for each user inside this user info. So how can I go about doing that? Well, to do that, we are going to be once again using our map method. So first of all, we have to go inside to the JavaScript world, and then we have to use our user info. And what is the user's info? User's info is that array, and now we are going to be iterating over through that array. Okay, so I'll just use like dot map method, and here I'll just provide a user as a perimeter, and now inside there we're going to be using our UL, and as I said that we have to provide a unique value trade. So in this case I'll just provide like math.random, and now it's going to give us like a random number each time we render our content to the browser. Okay, so now inside there I'll just use my li. We have to go inside to the JavaScript world once again, and we can use our user and then dot, and here you can see we have our username, location, and also the email. So if I just select my username, save my file, and if this is the first time you are working with React.js, this may look a bit crazy to you, but trust me, if you did a bit of practice you will get there. So I'm going to save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our usernames right here for each person. Now I'm going to duplicate this line of code, and instead of providing this username, I'm going to hit Control and space, and now we can select the location. I'm going to duplicate there once again, and now I'm going to hit Control and W once again, and now I'm going to select my email. Okay, so I'm going to save my file. Now let me go back, and this is how our entire code looks like. And first of all, we have our array. Inside this array we have our objects, and inside these objects we have our username, email, and also the location. And now we are iterating over through each item inside this array, and we are now only rendering the username, location, and also the email. And here you can see we are now getting the username, location, and also the email. So we can also change that to the username, email, and then location. And now it's going to give us the same result right here, which is amazing. But there is an optional thing that I want to do. If you don't care about that, you don't have to worry about that. If you don't know what a JavaScript destructuring is, you can go ahead and watch my JavaScript video about that. I have a complete course on JavaScript, so if you take that course, you would be fine. So now I'm going to destructure this value. If you can destructure that, you don't have to worry about that. Now I'm going to remove these users from here, and I'm going to provide my curly brace right here, and I'm going to destructure the username, also the email, and I'm going to also destructure the location as well. And now I no longer have to use these users again and again. I'm going to select that, hit Control D, and I'm going to remove that from here. Okay, so now if I save my file, and now if I refresh there, still we are getting that same result right here. But now we no longer have to provide that user dot again and again for all of these properties. So yeah, this is how we are going to be destructuring the properties from this array. Welcome to another challenge. So in this one, you will practice how you can render a list of data. So the first thing that I want you to do is that create a user list.jsx file, and inside there create a user list component. Create a users array with the following object, like this object right here. Each user will have the ID, name, and also the age. Then use a map method to render each user to the DOM. Okay, so that's going to be the first portion of this challenge. In the next portion, you're going to be creating a product list file, and inside that file you're going to be creating a product list component, and inside that component you're going to be creating a products array, and inside this array you will have like these objects which will represent different objects. So we have ID for the object, the name, price, and yeah, I guess that's gonna be fine. And now finally you have registered that inside the app component. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm gonna give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna create my user list.jsx component. Inside them, I'm going to be using my RAFCE. So the first thing that we want to do is that we want to create our users array. So I'll just use like const users, and that's going to be set to this array. And now inside this array, we're going to be creating different objects. For each object or for each user, we're going to be providing the ID, and also we're going to be providing the name. In this one, that's going to be set to alias, and I'm going to also provide the age of 25 to there. Okay, so now I'm going to duplicate that a few times, and I'm going to change the ID to 1 to 2 and also to 3. I'm going to also change the name to Bob and this one to Charlie. Change the age to 30 and also the age to 22. So that's going to be my users array, and now inside this array we have a few users right here. Now I want to iterate over through their users and I want to render them to the DOM. So how can I go about doing this? So I'll just remove this users list, and inside there we are going to be using our curly braces. So we are now entering the JavaScript word. So now we are going to be using the users, which is our array. So now inside there we can use our map method. So I'll just provide a user, and now here for each user we are going to be rendering the div. First of all, let's just write a div, and I'm going to also close this div right here, save my file. And for this div we are going to be also providing the key, and the key which we are going to be setting will be user.id, and this ID is coming from each of the users right here. So we have a ID 1, 2 and also the 3. So that's done. Now inside this div we are going to be also creating our h1, which will say name. Okay, so for the name we are going to be using like user.name. I'm going to also duplicate that and change that to age. Okay, and also change this label to age as well. So now I'm going to save my file. Let's just go ahead and go to our app and register our users list right here. So I'll use like users list, save my file, and here you can see we are now getting each of the user right here. So we have a